Welcome back to the Nullify Take, where we've got the TNT takes for you on The Amazing Race 34, Episode 6. I'm your host, Chris, and with me today, as always, is Michelle, my co-host. Michelle, how's things on your end?
Hi, I'm good. I got back into racing, did my first race with my daughter this week. It's only a short one, so it's a bit sad, but wearing the T-shirt X-Race. So
That's awesome.
I was feeling all pumped last week to get back into it. I need an adult type race though next.
Yeah, well, talking about all the racing, we had quite a lot of comments come through on the video, and thank you for everybody that is listening to this, after the live, during the live, but everybody, especially for going and commenting below the video after it, because it does help with YouTube algorithms and getting recognized and all that jazz. We had a few people comment on there, and one of the comments on there was from R. Nunez, and they've been a supporter of ours for a very long time. They've listened from the previous The Amazing Race and very loyal in commenting every week after we do our episodes. And they said, kudos to Michelle for sticking up for Sharik not hugging her dad. On an excellent interview, Sharik explained that she actually suffered from heat stroke. She also said there, rather than All-Star season, it would be fun to see the Amazing Race season with all those who do recaps on YouTube or podcasts plus Logan. I would bet on Michelle and Chris to make it to the final if there was a season like that. So we've got someone, shipping us to go out there and potentially do well. So if we want to do an adult race, if anybody wants to do the podcaster version of it, we're putting we're throwing our hat in the ring.
Yes.
We'll go do it. We'll go do it. Lovable Nikki, welcome back to the live as always. So happy to have you back. And immediately says sad about the elimination. We'll get into that very soon. And Ellen, welcome to the live again. This time right from the start. I believe she jumped in towards the end last time. Hi, Michelle and Chris. I'm at karaoke night, but I'm tuning in. Michelle, did you come up with the Amazing Race Australia All-Star picks?
Yes. Well, Ellen, I thought about it on Tuesday and I went to do it on Wednesday, and then life got in the middle of everything. And then I thought of it just before coming on tonight. And I wanted to do it justice and, have the list perfect. I wouldn't have been able to do it in the half an hour I had. So, Ellen, I promise I will have it next week. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I think both you and I, Michelle, just got smashed with life this last week, and we've both been very busy. But I feel like you now have to follow through. You promised on live podcast, so you got to do it.
And then I got out some of my really, really old notes. Like I've got a TAR book, and I thought, no, I can't put those teams in. I need to fix this, and I don't have enough time, and I've got to get into the bedroom. Yeah. So, Ellen, I promise I'll have it next week. Yep. In between doing reports. I've got to start school reports this week.
That's fine. That's fine. Life sometimes gets in the way. It's just one of those things I'm sure everybody understands. Christian, welcome to the live as well. He slept in for the Survivor recap. That's 100% fine. You can always go and check that out at a later stage. I hope you are still following The Amazing Race as well and that you're ready for some great conversation around that. Michelle, I did tell you just before we went live, we had another racer reach out to us. So we now have quite a few racers that have started talking to us. Louis from Louis and Michelle reached out to say, hey, he hopes that he can comment his way into our top team picks. And hey, listen, we're shameless. We will add you in our top picks right now. And he's killing it.
He is.
I was going to come into this podcast saying that I'm all caffeinated, but I still don't think I would have the energy levels that Louis has, because that guy's he just naturally has that energy, that he brings to everything that he does.
Yeah, I know. They're great. They're a good team. Yeah.
Yeah. And Christian here saying that the Jordan episode was amazing. So we've had 2 episodes now
Yes.
in Jordan. How did you feel about the fact that we got to see a whole other leg in Jordan? For me personally, I enjoyed it because I felt like we both were very high on the location last week,
Mm,
but it also allowed now for them to actually were previously they were kind of secluded and they had this big desert that they were in and they were
mm,
kind of far away from civilization. We got a little bit of that experience this episode of what it's like to be in potentially a third world country or a
yes.
country where people don't speak English and how difficult navigation can be and just reading signs and everything is foreign to you. You know, we got a little bit of
Yes.
that.
It was good because we saw 2 parts of Jordan. It's like seeing Egypt, although the pyramids are right next to the city. So it's not, I mean, I don't know where we were as opposed to the city this week, but even when they were at the place where they were doing the dancing, they had an aerial shot, and I actually paused just to see the freeway that's going past, this historical site. And I always think
Yeah.
that's so amazing, like in Rome, where you're walking down the street to the shops and all of a sudden there's Roman ruins to your right, just on the side of the road. It's just really bizarre for me, being from Australia, seeing that sort of stuff. So I love history. So yeah, Jordan was great.
I love anything, like I said last week on the podcast, that's a bit of a culture shock. You go there, it's not familiar to you, and you have to adapt to the circumstances around you. That's where growth
Yeah.
happens. Growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone. It doesn't happen
Yeah.
when you go from Australia to the US or when you go to England. You know, we
Yeah.
all are used to those Western
Mm.
civilizations. And yes, we've got all our, what's the right word I'm looking for?
Idiosyncrasies.
That's the word. It's a tongue twister. We all have that, right? But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I feel like if you're Western, you're used to that culture. It's all very much the same until you get thrown into the deep end. You have to go somewhere like Jordan
Yeah.
or somewhere that is just such a shock to the system.
India. I need them to go back to India, but really we need COVID over.
Yeah,
Or,
because we definitely need them to be in the taxis, the rickshaws, and all
yeah.
those kind of things when they're in India. That's a
Yeah.
big part of the race that we're not seeing because they're navigating themselves throughout this. But
Yeah.
right at the beginning, as Christian is pointing out here, and also Lovable Nikki, it's sad to see a team get taken out by something that is not race
Yes.
related. And we kind of called it. Like, I feel bad about calling it, but
Yeah.
last week we said it's probably going to be Abby and Will because they haven't had much of an edit. They seem
Mm.
like they've got great personalities, but we haven't seen a lot of that. And I wonder if that was to cushion the blow in some ways because we
Yeah.
ended up losing them so early.
Oh, it's so sad. So her eyes were red. So I didn't know whether she'd been crying or whether she's the one that's sick. She could be sick. He looked quite healthy. Mind you, you can have COVID and be normal, totally normal.
Yeah.
She looked like the one who was sicker or sadder than what he was. Yeah, I was so sad for her because I quite like them as a team. They
Yeah.
seem really kind-hearted and beautiful people.
And we also know that they're big fans of the show. You know, they got on after probably applying. Like, imagine Michelle, like someone like
Oh,
yourself, applying year after year. You never get on, and then that one
yeah.
opportunity you get to go onto the show, you get taken out
Mm,
by this thing that is invincible or invisible. You can't see it, you know, and that's kind of what Claire said. Like, how
yes.
devastating to see someone get taken out by something that's
Mm,
completely out of their control. And
mm,
we hate to see it. I hope that Abby and Will gets another opportunity. Like, if there is a
yeah.
team that we have to, put down for a return season, it would be someone like them. You know, I
Yeah.
remember quite a while ago, there was the father and son team, and the father ended up getting an injury, right?
Oh,
And got pulled
yes.
out.
Yeah.
And they got pulled out of the season that they were in. They were doing pretty well, even with the dad
Yeah.
having that injury, but they ended up getting out of it because they had to stop. But luckily, they got that call back, and we don't spoil how they did in that callback, but they ended up doing pretty well.
I actually like that team a lot.
They were cool.
I one of my fellow podcasters from that season didn't really like them at all. So it
Oh,
was
really?
really funny doing the podcast together. So I really like them, and yeah.
Can't remember the names, but I remember them being a likable team, and I remember them coming back, and I remember the full journey of what they were
Mm,
able to achieve when they came back. So I'm
mm,
hoping Abby and Will, Phil ever listens to this podcast, probably doesn't, but if any of the producers or anybody listens to it, please get these guys back on because
yeah,
I hate to see somebody go out like this.
yeah, definitely.
Well, they start off the second leg in Jordan. We learn that because of the fact that everybody, I guess because of the fact that Abby and Will got taken out by this thing, it is going to be a non-elimination, which goes against the plans of what they wanted for the season.
Mm.
And it makes a liar out of Phil, but I mean, who would have known?
Yeah, exactly.
Who
Unless
would
he
have known?
knew he knew if there was COVID, that team would be out. Like in the Australian and in the Canadian versions, the team weren't out, but they played hardball. You're sick, you're gone.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
so devastating. But you know, at the end of the day, they find out because this is an unplanned circumstance. There's going to be no elimination, but they're going to remove the groups here. So it's a hard reset for
Mm.
everybody in the game, and especially for a team like Glenda and Lumumba, who you know my love for that team. It just continues to increase, even though they struggled this episode, and we will talk about
Yes.
all of that.
Yeah.
They have an opportunity to go from the back of the pack and start with everybody else. So it takes
Yeah.
that advantage. I'm sure Louis and Michelle wouldn't have been happy about the fact that they
Yes.
worked their
No.
way up to the front, but suddenly they're leaving at the same time as everybody else. But
Mm.
everybody starts on the exact same point here, but they also get a warning. Listen, next leg is going to be tough. Just because you guys get a free ride this time, you're going to be leaving in 2-2-2. And then the last team, you don't want to be last. You're going to be 45 minutes behind everybody else,
Yes.
which I
Like
think is a really tough pull to swallow if you're that team, which is going to be
very
Glenda and Lumumba.
yes. Your favorite team.
They're struggling. They're like hanging on by a thread at this point.
They
And
are.
yeah, but we'll
Oh,
talk about
yeah.
them quite a bit. They get this
Okay.
first clue.
We'll get to
They
them. I love how Phil started them off again by amending his initial go by just saying travel safe or yes, travel safe go
yeah.
instead of the world is waiting because the world's already there. They're already in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad he did that again.
It's like a mid-season reset, you know, let's go
Mm.
again. Everybody start a new race from here. I don't know how much
Yeah.
time there would have been in between the legs. And, you know, I'm assuming with the COVID tests, there's a certain amount of time you've got to wait in between tests or things like that. I mean, I should know. It
Mm.
happened so recently. But, you know, I'm sure there would have been like maybe they were already behind schedule slightly. I don't know if they were on
Yeah.
schedule, what were happening on that stage, but they decided to get everybody out of there together. They have to go to their first clue, which is to race to the bookstore in the city. And this is where things get real. This is where we get to experience the madness of being in a country that you're not used to. People looking for someone that can speak English, looking for signs, can't see any
Mm.
English signs. It's all in Arabic, you know, and
Yes.
it was interesting to see teams navigate and see who flourishes and who doesn't. But again, they're naturally starting to pair up in these couples. And I've got to say, the Military Brothers twins alliance, I know they're like frenemies, but I feel like that's such a it's not a group I would have seen prior to the season working
No,
together, but they
not at
clearly get
all.
along really well and they do
Yeah.
work pretty well together. I still think there's a team to be feared or a group of players to be feared in this
Yes. Oh, well,
competition.
they're as strong as each other. They're very
Yeah,
equal. So, you know, it's good to keep your enemies close.
that's
You
true.
know, not really enemies, but you know, you want to know where they are.
Yeah. And also one of the things that I noticed, you know, the landscape, the buildings and everything, it's
Mm.
so foreign to you. And I think it's so easy to misjudge. Like if you're out there and you're running, like, you know, I don't know how it is in America. Like actually I've been to America. I know that in America houses don't all look exactly the same, you know, and it's the
Mm.
same with certain parts of Australia, you know, different buildings, different landscapes, but these
Yes.
buildings there all look the same. All the
Yes.
different alleyways they could go into look the same. It would be hella confusing where you go
Mm.
into an alleyway and you're like, didn't I just, and I'm sure one of the team said it, didn't I just run down this alleyway like a
Yeah.
couple
You
of minutes
wouldn't
ago?
know. You
Who
wouldn't
gets
know.
lost?
And also the idea of having a bookstore in the middle of a pavement, like you
Yes.
wouldn't be looking there. You'd be looking around, even though the bookstore was open, makes it a bit easier to see. But you know, in Sydney, there used to be little places where you could buy newspapers and magazines and chocolates and things on a pavement, but it was a bit smaller than that bookstore. So, but I would never think to look in the middle of a pavement for the bookstore. So I think that threw a lot of them off
Mm.
straight away.
Yeah, and obviously Emily, you know, one of the two twins, she's been struggling with a bit of a thigh injury, which still carried over into this leg, and she had to like struggle through that in the episode. I do feel like she's going to get past it because they were still pretty impressive this leg, even though she had this issue. There were times where she was just, you know, pushing through the pain barriers, which is kind of what you have to do when you're in a race like this. I'm sure adrenaline takes over at times.
Yeah. definitely. You just got to keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just know you have to keep going no matter what. I mean, I once did a race I had plantar fasciitis. And did I tell you about this?
I
This
don't
is
I don't think so. I don't think so.
this is tangent number one. So I had plantar fasciitis, which is a huge pain in your heel.
Yep.
And it lasted for exactly 2 years. At work, I had to work in heel. I don't work in heels, but I had to work in heels just to take the pressure off my heel. So I did a race when I was at the height of plantar fasciitis. And at the end of I just went, I'm just reliving the pain. The pain was so intense. After 6 hours, there was actually a massage lady there who could massage you. And I just couldn't even have my feet done because it was just intense pain. I was like on the verge of tears. But you just keep going because you want to do your best that you can do if you're that kind of person. Not everyone is like that. But yeah, I'm really hard on myself and I kept going and literally I couldn't walk the next day. It was so bad.
Yeah, I think we touched on it. Like one of the biggest injuries I had was playing rugby, where I broke my collarbone, and I didn't even realize until the coach told me you got to come off, and I'm like, no, I still want to play, and he's like, try and lift your left arm, and I couldn't lift it, and I was like, oh, okay,
Oh my
that's when I
God.
realized something is wrong, and I had to get off. And it's funny because I did so many karate competitions. The biggest injury I ever did to myself doing a karate competition was breaking a little bone in my foot, which took me out for like 6 to 8 months that I couldn't compete. Just a little bone because I
you
kicked.
kick people with your foot?
Well, you actually kick with your shin in most cases. But what happened is I went for a kick and the guy lifted his elbow and I kicked into his elbow and it broke one of the little bones in my foot. So it was just bad timing. And that's the injuries I've had. But I've never had to persevere in a race scenario like where I'm running. I've had cramps and things happen when I do like Spartan races and I do like 40 kilometers, obstacle course races and crazy stuff like that. I've had that where you like,
wait a minute,
you can't move.
40-kilometer.
Yep.
Obstacle. Where's that?
Bright, Australia, close to Melbourne. Like
what's it called?
It's called Spartan. It's Spartan races.
Was Spartan. It was 40 kilometers. Oh my God, that's insane.
So it was the full marathon one that we did. So it's like crazy amounts. We ran up I know it's completely off topic, but we ran up a mountain, right? Where we got to the top of the mountain, people were, how you do these skydiving, like gliders? People were running off this. Yeah, like full on doing gliding. I was like, I just ran up this freaking mountain and people are jumping off this thing doing gliding. It's crazy. This is a couple of years ago. I'm not that fit now. This is about 3-4 years ago.
Did you also get electrocuted?
No, that's Tough Mudder. Like Spartan, Spartan doesn't do that, luckily.
See,
so
I only do. I've done a mud run here, and you have to get into the ice bath, and they put it. It's like it's not even a bath. It's basically a huge hole in the ground with water and a hell of a lot of ice in it. And we thought, oh, we'll be okay. We'll just swim across. We'll be fine. And then they put a log over the top. So you have to actually submerge yourself. And I'm trying to just get under like a limbo. So I don't have to get my whole head under it. And it was like, oh my God. And I just couldn't breathe. It was like, but yeah, we do love doing these sorts of things. And I don't know how many podcasters of the race actually do anything that
any type of racing.
I don't know.
That's why I think we'll I'll put the challenge out there. I think we do all right if we were to go up against some of the podcasters. I'll challenge any podcaster to the amazing race. But funny you mentioned the ice bath because we have got something in New Zealand, like a Tough Mudder race where you go into it and you got to go into the ice bath. But when you do it in New Zealand, it's normally towards the winter. So you jump into the ice bath to heat up and then you get out because New Zealand gets so bloody cold. it's like, oh, nice. I can heat up in this ice water for a little bit.
Awful.
Yeah, it's horrible doing those races over here, especially in the winter.
I just remembered Logan is actually a very good runner. He can run for long distances. So yeah, he'd give you a run for your money.
That's good. That's good. Probably at the moment, he might even beat me. Like I said, I'm definitely not at the shape that I was in 3 or 4 years ago, but I'm getting there. I'm starting to put a lot of training back in, Michelle. You never know when one of these shows may come calling, so you never know when you need to be ready.
I don't train.
All right. Back to the episode. We get these teams. They're racing to the bookstore. They finally get to the bookstore. A few of them get there first, and they have to decide between a Detour And the detour is going to be step by step or letter by letter. The first two teams to get there is not actually the first two teams who gets to the detour, which was quite interesting. They do swap leads here at this point because Marcus and Michael were the first two there, followed by the twins. But Louis and Michelle actually overtakes them and gets to the detour, I believe, in first place. But at this point, there's two options to them. Step by step is dancing. It's a choreography that they have to learn, which is local to Jordan. And then letter by letter, they have to go and memorize 28 letters in this Arabic language and then pronounce it back to whoever. Which one would you have done, Michelle? It looks like you wouldn't have wanted to do the Arabic one.
Dancing. I know the Arabic language has a lot of the in it. And I'm like, who was it who can't roll his eyes? Derek. I'm like, Derek, I
hilarious.
can't roll my eyes.
I don't even want to make those. I don't want to make those noises for people listening to this podcast. Second. But the funniest thing is Claire trying to like get him to do it while gurgling water. She's like, just gurgle this water and learn how to do it. And him saying he had nightmares and tried to do like Spanish class at school, could never get it. It was hilarious to watch.
She's saying it's at the back somewhere, but I'm thinking, I thought it was just behind your teeth.
It's in the front. It's in the front. It's
yeah, I can't
like
do
in the front. You see, why it's quite natural for me, and this is why if I was to get into this, I reckon I would kill letter by letter in the sense that I speak 3 languages. One of the languages has got a lot of rolling with the R. It's got a lot of the back of the throat for like the G's, because Afrikaans is a language that comes from German and Dutch. So if you can speak German and Dutch, you do a lot of rolling with the R's. You do a lot of the back of the throat for some of the noises that you're making. So I feel like I've said this before, like if you speak more than one language, I feel like the pronunciation of these different words is something that's going to play in your favor. And there was one team that had an ace up their sleeves. I didn't know that the twins both had an upbringing and a Jewish background. They could speak Hebrew, and that had helped them in this one.
What are the odds of Asian twins growing up learning Hebrew? Like, what are the odds? Yeah. It's so small. And then they knew. I was just thinking, for kids, is when they grow up, they must know how to roll their R's. I don't know how, because my mother's always been able to roll her R's because she does it with singing. And I can't. And I've heard her do it. I kept trying to do it, but I could never do it. So I'm just wondering, how do they teach kids to do it who can't do it?
It's crazy. Like one of my ex-girlfriends, she was actually Chinese, but born in Scotland, and she had a Scottish accent. The first time I met her, it blew my mind because I was like, the words that are coming out of your mouth and the way that you're pronouncing it's not matching with how you look. Like it's so crazy. And I think that's like with the twins, it was that same mistake where you look at them and you're like, there's no chance. But they had this upbringing, it played into their skill set. And I feel like the twins is just that team. They're like the Swiss Army knife of this season. They just got all these different hidden skills up their sleeve, and they just adapt to everything. They're kind of like what, Kim and Penn was last season.
Look, if they, you know how a few years ago they had the hashtag for all the teams and they had to create their own name? They could have been a team Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it. They just have all these skills. Lovable Nikki says the twins mentioned being raised in a Jewish household in the first episode, I believe.
Yes, it did.
Completely went over my head. I didn't remember that.
But I did. And I didn't even think of them learning Hebrew as a part of that. But of course they would have. But yeah, I remember them saying it, but I was just flabbergasted, for want of a better word.
Yeah, hats off to both the twins and the military brothers from what I saw. Maybe more teams figured this out, but I mean, Derek and Claire definitely didn't. That they figured out they could go half and half. So one needed to learn the first half and then the other person needed to learn the second half. Marcus and Michael didn't have the skill set of speaking more than one language as far as we're aware. Marcus, if you're listening to this, you can correct me. I know you've commented on this before, but they found a way to get the words down pretty quickly, and Marcus just made sure he avoided the pronunciations that he wasn't comfortable with, and Michael would take those ones. They still end up leaving this challenge in first place, which was really impressive to see, with the twins then just shortly on behind them getting out of there in second place. leaving Derek and Claire there for a little bit longer before they got out of there. I think all of the other teams ended up going for step by step. So all of them would have gone for the same
Yes.
option that you ended up going for. And listen, I think if we were in a team and you told me I feel so uncomfortable with doing this, I would have been like, let's go for step by step. Because like I've told you before, I don't mind dancing. Like it's a big part of the South African culture. You need to be able to dance. And it was interesting to hear Aubrey mention that in previous dance challenges that they've had, she can sort of relate it back to salsa, which she had experience with. But with this specific one, it was so different and so foreign to what she's ever experienced before in any of the dances that they've done.
Yeah, I mean the girls said at the beginning, oh, it's an eight beat, but obviously, well, they were turning at the same time as dancing, and then they kept who was jumping.
It was Glenda. I think
jumping, and they were saying stop bouncing.
Lumumba and Glenda both were
quite a bit doing it all.
Yeah.
It
you just can't contain Lumumba. You can't contain him. He's like Louis. He's just got too much energy.
A little bouncing jelly bean.
Yeah, he's got and you can clearly, Michelle, you can clearly start seeing now that swag I told you about. Like it's coming out. He's got it. He's got that special X factor about him, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why I like him. I just think they're adorable together, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But you know, Aubrey and David, they're the first team there. Aubrey sort of talked about the fact that, you know, they had the salsa experience. They could relate back to that. For me, funny enough, I think the thing that would help me, because I've done a lot of dancing. My sister taught me how to do ballroom dancing. Like I did tango, rumba, like the mamba, all that stuff with her, because she was a really good ballroom dancer growing up. And I was like her training partner at home. So when she wasn't training she's like, I need to teach you how to do this. And she would teach me the guy part. Then I would do the guy part, and I would help her. So I can dance. I can do all these different types of dancing. But I think the thing that would, for me, funny enough, that would really get me to understand choreography, because I've never been taught how to do choreography in such a sense, is actually karate, which is the funniest thing, because in karate, there is this thing which is called a kata, where you learn how to do certain movements in a certain way and at a certain pace. And you've got to learn all these steps throughout it. And that's how my brain would work. I'd be like, oh, this is like a karate kata, and this is, I'm going to do this step, and this is I'm going to do that step. And I think my brain would go back to that, which would be so weird, because I don't think a lot of people think that martial arts could potentially help you do a dance, unless it's the Brazilian capoeira or whatever they do, capoeira. Yeah.
Capoeira. Yeah. I knew someone who did capoeira. That is like a dance. That is so different. Yeah, that's a bit of a tangent, isn't it? I was wondering when the woman was demonstrating, the first with the couple, when they were demonstrating, and I'm like, okay, that sword. Yes, it's pointing away from the guy. It kept pointing away.
The sword,
Please, the sword. Can you please keep it away from your partner when you're trying this dance? I'm thinking, God, if they turn the wrong way and do the whole sword thing, is it going to come down on them? And oh, geez.
You just hope that it was a reverse blade sword, because you get those that have actually reverse bladed so that it can't cut the person in front. But I saw it as well. Like, I mean, I was like, hey, the sword in there, it's an interesting prop to have while you're swinging your arms around doing spins and things like that. You know, the wrong spin could end someone's career, you know, immediately.
Oh, God. Race over. Sorry, we've lost a hand.
Jeez. But it ends up Aubrey and David, they do figure it out pretty quickly. They do get out of there in third place after I believe both the military twins and also the military brothers and the twins, military twins, I'm already like merging them into one team, get out of there at the same time. Aubrey and David, they're in third place. Louis and Michelle, they go in there. They're fourth place overall. And one thing I will say about Louis, whenever he goes into anything, even if he's not a dancer, he commits. Like, he puts his heart and soul into it.
I know, and he was smiling, and everyone was really happy this episode. Did you notice the amount of smiling everyone did with that dance?
Do you think it was because people knew that they weren't going to go home at the end of this? They're like, oh, we can just enjoy this leg. Like, we're going to push for a good placement, but we can enjoy the leg, because even if we do place last, at least we know we're not going home.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, everyone was really happy. I'm like, oh my God, you've just failed the dance again, but you're all smiley. Okay, let's go again.
Yeah, 100%. We also forgot to mention that on the way to the detour, Louis and Michelle actually bumped into the pit stop. They got to the pit stop before they even got to the detour.
I know, it's good find. Good finds. You
Yeah.
know where to go if you can remember where it was in all the racing, to remember to go back there. Great find.
But they said when they got there, they were fearful that they were in last place because they got there, and I was like, "What do you mean? Like how long were you searching for the detour that you
Mm.
thought the whole leg was done by then?" It
Yeah,
didn't make sense.
exactly.
I don't know
Yeah.
if it was like special splicing of words in the editing that maybe made it sound different to what it was, but it didn't make much sense to me. Also, then in fifth place, after Louis and Michelle, finally Derek and Claire they get out of the letter by letter section of the detour. Quentin and Maddie they get into sixth place, leaving Glenda and Lumumba there. They were the ones that struggled the most. Glenda
Yeah.
getting really down on herself here, feeling like she's letting her husband down, which is going to be a trend throughout this episode. But
Yeah.
Lumumba, the exact opposite to the married couple that we saw last season,
Yeah.
and really standing by Glenda here, saying, don't feel like that, don't get inside of your head.
Mm.
Like, I mean, what a great guy.
Mm. Oh, he's so nice. He's very supportive. He's
Yeah.
great. He's great.
Because you can just tell Glenda is super competitive. Like, you can tell she's like, I need to be the best. I need to be at the front. I feel like she's putting more pressure on herself than anyone else.
Yeah.
And Lumumba is that balance. Like, Lumumba is also someone that's competitive, but he knows how to bring her back down to ground and just, make her not feel as bad and get her to focus on the task at hand.
Yeah, definitely.
Some real raw emotion from Glenda when they got that finished.
I know. I felt bad. I felt there. I know that there's a height difference, but I felt like it was so obvious this episode with the dancing. And I think she was more in the foreground in a lot of shots. He was more dancing in the background, which accentuated it even more. Yeah, it was just, and I know my husband looked over at the screen at one point and went, like, with the dancing, and he was so short. My husband didn't say anything, but it was like I could understand what he was thinking.
He's like, is that the mother and daughter team?
Yeah.
Mother and son, I should say.
Yeah.
Nah, but I mean, listen, they finally get there. They have to go to the next section, which is going to be the roadblock. And the roadblock, this leg is going to be feeling broken carted. And interesting to see who ends up doing this. Last week, I did have Molly confirm that they could only do 6 roadblocks per person for the whole season. That was the cap. So she got back to me to let me know that. So that probably means it's like maybe about 12 legs or 11 legs in total, but no one could exceed 6. So there was a cap because we went back and forth saying, is there a cap? Because certain people have been doing quite a lot. Lumumba is a great example of that, where he's been doing, I feel like 2 or 3 in a row now. So Glenda was always going to have to do this one, but it also forces the teams to swap a few people out and have different people do this bit here. Quite funnily, Louis and Michelle, they get there first, even though they left. Again, the lead swap, which is crazy to me. Like, Louis Michelle somehow keeps getting ahead of people between the obstacles or between the different.
Just good at
checkpoints.
navigating. Good at navigation and getting to different places. I mean, just seeing that who's feeling broken carted, I'm like, oh my God, that is not me. My partner's doing that one. Like,
I would be okay with this. I would have no issue doing, like, the problem is you don't know what it is until you get there, but you would probably think, okay, well, broken
it's a
carted,
cart of some kind.
It's something that's broken. You're either going to have to, like, do something physical, or you're going to have to put it back together. You'd probably be able to put that together. And I'd have again, my dad is a builder. I grew up around construction my whole life. I did an apprenticeship in aluminium fabrication and joinery when I went to England, got qualification in that. So, I mean, I could put stuff together. I don't think it would be a problem.
I never saw my dad fix anything. So I'd be behind the 8 ball there totally.
Which is, it's fair. I mean, that's why, you get different people doing different things, complementing each other's strength while you're out there. I would feel pretty confident, but my problem, because I'm an overthinker, Michelle, I reckon I would have made the exact same mistake that Michael did. I would be running back and forth, looking at how many nails is exactly in each side. I would be thinking it's a detail challenge, but it ended up not being that. It just ended up being who could get it together the fastest, and they didn't even care if the thing fell apart afterwards.
And actually get it to the pit stop. Oh my gosh. I thought when the first one fell apart, I thought, wow, are they all going to fall apart? This would be really fun to watch if they're all missing pieces as they're walking along the road. Quick, hammer it back in. What
Can you
were they
imagine they get
taking
to
in the cart?
can you imagine they get to the end and Fool's like, no, you needed to bring your whole cart here, and
Oh
then
my
like a bolt or
God.
something fell off, and you had to go like
Yeah.
look for this piece that fell off, go
Or
back.
look for a nail. Like,
So what was your
seriously.
question? I interrupted you there.
I can't remember now. Can someone tell me? I'm too tired.
But anyway,
Oh,
so
yeah,
it was funny. It was funny
oh, what
seeing
was
how
in the cart?
what was in the card. I don't
Yeah.
remember. I don't remember. Does
It
anybody
looks
in
like
the
a rolled up carpet. I don't know, but they did have to take whatever was had to take whatever was there in the cart to Phil. Why were there balloons there?
Yeah, I don't know. No
Because
idea.
they didn't go in the cart.
Yeah. No idea. No idea. I mean, maybe one of the racers can let us know if they listen to this later on, like what was in the card, Very important
Yeah,
information here for the
please.
fans.
We need to
And
know.
also what was the balloons
What did you
doing
do
there? I
with the
mean,
balloons?
but it was funny. It was funny seeing them like work out how to do this thing. Like Louis, he's becoming a bigger and bigger character every
Mm,
episode now. He's getting like Michelle's not getting as much of the confessionals. I feel like
mm,
Louis is kind of carrying the confessionals on that team. But
mm.
him talking about the fact that this is no IKEA. This is like, not
Yeah,
like going to IKEA and putting something together where you've got like
just do
a
anything.
instruction sheet. This is part one, this is part two, this is part three.
Oh,
It's just here's the hammer and nails and the wood, and you go ham and just put this thing together. And
yeah,
at least they had something to work off. At least they had an example that they could work
exactly.
off.
Exactly. But I'd be like some of them wanting to get the nails right, the pieces of wood, and I
That would
know
be
all the
me.
wood wouldn't look the same, so that would throw me. And yeah, me wanting to get things right.
Yeah, so I feel like Michael falling behind the way that he did, and why probably Marcus didn't get as annoyed at him as he did previously in the season when he felt like Michael did something he didn't agree with, was the fact that anybody could have made that mistake. Like, I think it's a reasonable mistake to make, because normally there is a trick to each one of these things, which clearly just wasn't there. The trick was
Yeah.
that there was no trick in how do you put this thing together. Just speed was required to get out of there.
And the trick is for it to get there in one piece.
Yes. That looked like it would have been a bit of a heavy carry as well. Like for some
Yeah,
of
and
them that had to
he
carry it.
broke the wheel on the first. Who was it? Louis broke the wheel on the first little piece of pavement, and I'm thinking, oh my God, they have to carry it. How heavy is that thing? Because wood's not light if you've got the heavier kind of wood. I don't know
Yeah.
how far they had to go, mind you.
Like David and Aubrey, they got there reasonably late. Like they were sort of mid-pack when they got there. But again, David being a helicopter pilot, obviously good with his hands, obviously good at putting stuff together. He ends up going from being one of the like kind of fifth or sixth team getting there, and gets out of there second. And it looked like his cart made it all the way as well. Like it looked like he had a
Yeah.
sturdy cart, and they nearly overtook Louis and Michelle. But the only reason that Louis and Michelle ends up getting there before them is because of the luck they had in finding the pit stop prior to having to go to it. So they knew exactly where they were going, while Aubrey and David still had to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way,
exactly.
Aubrey, starting to see more of her personality as well. She had a really funny comment in this episode where they had all the clothes on and things when they went to go do the dance. She's like, "You look hot in that," and he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, thanks." And she's like, "No, you look hot." That was just a funny little comment that she
Yeah.
had there. I'm starting to see that personality come out.
And then at the mat, they left that comment in about that Phil always has an unpleasant look on his face. Phil went, "What? What do you mean?"
He does. He puts it on.
Poor
He
Phil.
pastes it on for the teams that get there later on, and he's like disappointed dad face is what he's got when people get there late.
Definitely, he was really beaming and smiling at Aubrey. So yeah, that was
Well,
that was
they did
funny.
good. They did good. I think that's their best placement. It is their best placement for the season. The first
Second.
half of the mega leg, they got third place, but that doesn't really count. So the best placement they had prior to this episode was 6, and that was the mega leg. So they went from
Doing
8th
well.
place to 2nd place in this last leg.
Yeah,
Pretty good
that's
improvement.
pretty good.
Yeah. And how about Louis and Michelle being the first team to get back-to-back first places, the first team to do first place twice? And they came
Yes.
from being 10th in the first episode, working their way up to a 5th finish and a 4th finish before they've now come first twice. Is Louis and Michelle the team to look out for? Did they come from nowhere? Because we weren't focused on
they
them.
have come from nowhere, because I thought, geez, they don't look as bad. They don't look bad in that first one when they came 10th. And I'm like, you're not supposed to come 10th with the way you look. You're supposed to be better than this. But
Because they
now
look
they've
in
proven
shape.
it. Yeah, yeah, they're proving it.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, because Louis and Michelle have had their two best legs, is there something about the fact that they had the best two legs in Jordan, which is a little bit off the beaten track? Other teams maybe struggle to adapt to the cultural
Mm.
differences or, being in this environment more than Louis and Michelle. And what would it be like when they go back to France and it's back to Europe? Can they build on this lead that they've got now and the fact that they've
Mm.
had two first places, or will that help other teams who maybe felt uncomfortable in this foreign environment?
Do they find it harder to navigate longer distances, perhaps? Because Jordan would have been quite close, everything there. If they have problems with long distances, then yeah, I can see why they would, move down the pack.
Mm.
But I can't recall. I thought they didn't have anything glaringly obvious.
I can't remember if there was anything obvious. I think they may be okay. I mean, they've had some, like I said, fifth place and fourth place when they were over in Europe prior to this. So the first one was the worst, and then they've improved. But in the first league, anything can happen. You're still finding
Mm,
your feet as a team.
yeah.
But they definitely
Okay.
have that momentum going for them now. The other teams here that finishes, obviously, Aubrey and David, they get in second place. That's a good improvement for them.
Yeah.
Another team that's starting to sort of creep up there is Quinton and Maddie. Quinton and Maddie getting in third
Yes.
place here.
I was like, what's happening with the first, second, and third? I was like, where are the boys? Where are the twins?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Marcus and Michael fifth, and then Emily and Molly sixth, which is the lowest we've seen them, and that will mean that they're going to be in group number 3 when
But
they
if they're
leave here.
starting to, we know they're good teams, and if they're starting together, they'll probably help each other along so that they can get further.
Yeah.
Whereas if they were paired with another team, they may not work with them. So
Yeah.
this might be actually a plus for them.
This could be a plus for them, definitely, and I think they're both capable of making a comeback here as well in the next couple of legs. Obviously, Marcus has said he's traveled. When he commented on one of the previous videos that we had or podcasts that we had, he mentioned that he's traveled quite extensively through Europe as part of his military deployment. So that's one of the reasons they were so good at navigating in those countries and were getting from point A to B very quickly. And it could come back into effect if he's been in France before. I can't remember if France was specifically a place that he's mentioned that he's been before, but that could definitely change things up here. Derek and Claire, they get fourth place here, just behind Quinton and Matty. Had a pretty solid episode here as well. Claire ultimately, she's starting to redeem herself in these roadblocks. She's starting to do really well in the roadblocks.
I tell you what, there isn't a weak team there, except maybe for Glenda and Lumumba right now, but the others are really there's not much between them. I'm not going to call them equal, but there isn't much between them. It's like as we go along, if Glenda and Lumumba go out next leg and you say to me who's going out next, I would have no idea because those 6 teams are quite equal.
Yeah.
And it's quite rare for you to have that at final 6.
Is this one of the most stacked casts we've had in a while? Like when it comes to people just like, I'm not saying that, how do they stack up against other seasons, but because it's hard to do that comparison when they haven't raced against each other head to head. But I mean, like as a season, with so many great teams, with so many, like, I feel like, and this is being so unfair to them at this point because you can't help what gets shown on the edit. The team that maybe has been the biggest dud so far is Aubrey and David. We haven't seen much of them. That's starting to change now that Aubrey's David seems to be a little bit more bland, but Aubrey's personality is coming out a little bit more now. So we're seeing more of that. But I feel like overall, like all of these teams are so likable. Like I actually, obviously I've got, I got to stay with Glenda and Lumumba because they're just awesome. And Lumumba is just awesome. Like Lovable Nikki here says, I teared up when Glenda and Lumumba were last at the roadblock. Al is so supportive. That talk he gave was so amazing. And that's why, they've just got a lot of heart. And that's why I really enjoyed them as the underdog team. But they're definitely fighting for their lives in the game right now. But going back to my original question, do you feel like this is the most stacked cast we've had in a while, just when it comes to making it difficult for us as fans to decide this is the team?
Yes, I really do. And I think there's going to be problems for us going forward. Trying to make predictions. Because there's, all teams have their pros and cons, but I can't find anything glaringly obvious as a con for anybody.
Well, let me tell you one thing that does stand out at this stage still. Quentin and Maddie. Quentin has done 4 of the roadblocks. Maddie has done 2. Louis and Michelle. Louis has done 4 of the roadblocks. Michelle has done 2. That stands out a little bit. And Emily and Molly. Molly has done 4 and Emily's done 2. So that's a little bit lopsided. It can be fixed pretty quickly, but it means that they do need to rely on their other partner a little bit, where all the other teams have gone 3 and 3. So Derek and Claire, they're equal at 3 and 3. Marcus and Michael 3 and 3, and Glenda and Lumumba 3 and 3. So they're stacking their roadblocks up really well.
Yeah.
They're not getting close to the 6 limit, but you don't want to be at that 6 limit before it's the end of the race, and then you're like, okay, now I have to rely on someone else. Like, say for instance, Michelle now has to do all the roadblocks.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen because you don't know what the skill what will be. And I mean, not that you find out what it is, but you can sort of try and work it out. And, you know, if the teams that have the 4 and 2 going on, the 2, they might be of the same sort of level as the other 2 anyway. So they sort of have a chance if they're doing it at the same time. So they have someone on an equal par. It's not as though there's a 4 and a 2 and then there's, you know, the rest of them are just 3s.
Yeah.
Or 5 and a 1 even. That would be worse.
Really, really funny moment here at the roadblock with everybody being very grateful that Emily didn't do this roadblock because she was so good at putting the bike together.
Yeah, that was funny.
And that put a bit of pressure on Molly.
Yeah, she was good. Mind you, anything compared to the Ducati would be easy now because that was insanely hard.
Yeah, I agree. So ultimately, Christian thinks that the ballroom dancers could be in trouble next week. Do you agree with that, Michelle? Do you think that they're going to go from second to last? Do you see warning signs?
No.
I don't see it either, Christian. I don't see it, Christian. Like, edit-wise, I can see it maybe because they haven't had the biggest edit. So
they haven't. You know what? And because they haven't had the biggest edit, they could be out soon. I don't know how they would go from second to last next episode. I really think it's going to be Glenda and Lumumba. I'm sorry, but I think it will be. If it's not,
I'll just mute you when you say that next time. Like, no, Glenda and Lumumba going out next. Glenda and Lumumba has got to find a way to stay in. They just need to beat one team at a time, Michelle. Let's put that out there.
I know. Look, if Christian's right and Aubrey and David go out, oh my God, like that would be crazy. Yeah. I can't even see that happening, but that would be crazy.
Listen, I'm the biggest Glenda and Lumumba fan, but I'm so worried for them. They have not had good luck. Since leg 1 and leg 2, where they got second and second, it's been 10th place, 8th place, 7th place, 7th place. It's not looking positive, and I'm really worried about them going into this next leg. I do think Marcus and Michael and Emily and Molly are definitely way too low. I still have my eyes on them as potential threats to win this whole thing. Derek and Claire are starting to do pretty decent. 2nd place, 4th place now here. Quentin and Maddie, they're doing pretty reasonably well, but you know, Quentin and Maddie
don't have a big edit. They don't have a big edit.
So that's why Quentin and Maddie and Aubrey and David would be my guess as the next 2 teams potentially to go. Yeah. I feel like Glenda and Lumumba's still got a little bit of they've got a little bit of runway in them. Like maybe, but I don't like my predictions on them being the ultimate winners for the season. That's starting to diminish at the moment because I just don't see it, which is sad.
For you.
Yeah, I really wanted that to happen. Christian is saying, there is navigation, which is not good. Yeah, that's true. I do remember Aubrey and David really struggling with the navigation because they haven't had to, in Jordan, they haven't had to drive themselves everywhere. I think they've been shuttled.
Yeah.
And that can make a difference. Yeah.
Yes.
Can make a definite difference for them in this. All right, so final placements overall. Louis and Michelle gets that first place 2 legs in a row. Well done. They get the Expedia reward points for 5 nights trip to Barcelona, and they're lucky because they now can get in first place with the other team that's going to leave with them, which is Aubrey and David. They're going to be 45 minutes ahead of Glenda and Lumumba. That's how bad the navigation has to be from Aubrey and David to ultimately, and I feel like 45 minutes is a lot of time to try and make up, but they're in that first group. Second group, Quentin and Maddie, 3rd place, Derek and Claire in 4th place, both leaving in that second group. And then Marcus and Michael and Molly and Emily, they leave in the 3rd place, leaving Glenda and Lumumba right at the back. They have to do a lot of work, and they're following 2 very capable teams. It's going to be very exciting to see where we go next week, but I'm worried for them.
But mind you, remember the olden days where sometimes the last team used to leave like hell of a lot. Like, were they ever 2 hours apart? Because they used to leave at the time that they arrived at the pit stop. I'm sure there was at least an hour, sometimes an hour and a half between the first and the last teams. So, and that lead would change. So I won't count them out totally.
But I also think back in the day, we had more drama around taxi drivers getting things messed up. And
We might
now
get
all
that
of
in
it.
France, though.
Are they
Are we
actually
in
going to be in
France? Where are
taxis?
we? Where are we in France? Where are we going?
I don't know when France. They just said that they were going to France.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else knows. But title of the episode is simply medieval, so it might be French castles or something. I don't know. So it'd be pretty cool. But yeah, they're going to France. I don't know if they're going to be doing public transport. I feel like everything
No,
they're
I
doing
don't
right
think
now
they
is
will. Not
shuttled.
with the
It's
whole
it's in
COVID
a
thing
controlled
still.
environment that they're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Lovable Nikki here is saying she misses when they left at a time that they had arrived. I think they will go
Yes.
back to that as soon as the COVID. Like, if they don't, I'm going to be very disappointed because I think we all miss that. I miss the airport navigation of trying to get better flights, of just seeing the teams get together and having a bit of a chat while they're at the airport. That type of stuff, I definitely miss that, and hopeful that that will come back. It's still fun to watch the Amazing Race, but it's not quite the same, right, Michelle?
Yeah, it's not the same. And that's where shows like Race Across the World come in. They have to find their own transportation there. It generally isn't flights, though, because they're on the same continent. So they're doing things like trains
That's
and
so
buses
cool.
and coaches.
That's so cool.
And ththings like that. And there is a new show coming out in Australia. I don't know what it's called, so I can't make a Facebook group yet. But it sounds like it's halfway between Amazing Race and Race Across the World, because it's partners racing with challenges, and they have to find their own way to the next challenge. Now, I don't know how that works, because in the Amazing Race, it was quite controlled, whereas Race Across the World is quite a mess. Like, they're all over the continent of wherever they are. Whereas this show, how do you get challenges ready if you don't know when the people are going to get there? So I'd love to know the whole logistics of it.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I love Race. Is it called Race Around the World? I've seen one of the seasons.
Race Across the World.
Race Across the World. I think I saw one of the seasons where they raced from the southern part of America, like the USA, through down to the bottom. Yeah, they had to go through like South America, which was an amazing season. And it had I can't remember. I think it was the brother and sister that won that season. Like that.
I think it was.
Yeah.
And this one, are they filming it currently? I don't know whether they're filming yet, but they're doing the race from one side of Canada to the other.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the same sort of distance as what they
And the
did.
money they get is like not even close to enough. So they have to rely on local people to give them jobs, to make money, or to like hitchhike. And it is really cool. So I'm interested in this new show. Lovable Nikki here says that it looks like they're driving themselves. Someone has car trouble and runs over a cameraman. I couldn't tell.
At the end. I'm like,
it looks
what's
very
happening
dramatic
with the camera? And it went funny. And I want to go back and have a look. That looked quite shocking. And there was noise. Someone screamed, and
hopefully everybody's okay. Hopefully no one gets badly hurt, because sometimes you know how CBS likes to fake us out, and hopefully it's one of those cases.
Are.
Do you remember there was a season of The Amazing Race where there was this team? I think it was two guys that were in the team, and I'm so bad with names. I'm super bad with names, so I can't remember. And it's like one of the early seasons where I believe they were like in Namibia or something, and they were like racing on the sand. It was somewhere in Africa, and they rolled it.
Yes. Yeah.
And they ended up being out of, and they were like the form team that season. They were like, everybody thought they were going to win. And then I think the cameraman got badly hurt in that, and they were
the
like
cameraman
removed.
got hurt. I can't remember the exact details, but yes, they did roll the car. It was just near the road. I don't know whether they rolled off the road. It was just near the road.
I think they went too fast, because I'm pretty sure in that episode, the one guy told the other one, don't race this fast. You're going too fast on the sand or something. And like, because driving on sand and gravel and things like that is not the same as driving on tarmac. So you will roll something. But that was pretty dramatic. So hopefully it's not to that level. And we don't see something.
And then would that take that team out of the race? Would that make Glendon Lumumba move up?
Yeah, it would be such an unfortunate event if we do see someone going out that way. And I'm just in my mind trying to think about the people who had difficulty driving manual stick shift. because it's probably going to be one of them. And I do feel like Aubrey and David was one of those teams that really struggled with that. So hopefully that doesn't happen. We kind of called the Abby and Will one for this episode. Hopefully we're not right twice in a row.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this recap and being with us here in the live as well. We really appreciate it when you take part in the conversation. If you got to this point, please consider subscribing to the channel. It does help with getting our name out there. Liking, we had a lot of likes in the previous video. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the comments from everybody last week. So even if you're not in the live, let us know. I do read all of them. I do tell Michelle about it, even if she's busy and she can't read it. So please be sure to let us know what you thought of this episode. And on that note, we'll see you next week as we talk about episode 7 of The Amazing Race 34. See you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.